The corridor smells of dust and winter air, though the building's heating system rattles in a distant room. The investigator stands in the threshold of the storage vault, listening to the faint hum of fluorescent lights, a sound that almost merges with memory. For a moment, he forgets to breathe. It has been decades since anyone visited this space, and yet the room feels as if it has been waiting. The air is stale, thick with the quiet weight of what was left unresolved. Boxes lean against one another like tired silhouettes. Labels are sun-faded. A single desk lamp sits crooked on a metal table, its switch stiff from years of disuse. He flicks it on, and a muted circle of light spreads across worn linoleum. This is where the file has been sleeping. Nebraska, 1975. Cold case, unsolved. He steps forward, each movement deliberate, careful not to break the thin film of silence. The case has never left him, not really. It lingered in the background of every promotion, every commendation, every night he told himself the past could be walled off. But the mind remembers what paper tries to forget. And time, despite the illusion of distance, does not erase the weight of an unanswered story. The victim's photo sits taped to an old folder, its corners peeling. Age 27, daughter of a railroad engineer and a seamstress, born in a town too small for secrets yet shaped by them all the same. She worked at a modest municipal office, maintained a quiet life, never caused a disturbance, never asked for attention. Her friends described her as steady, kind, and almost painfully private. Nothing in her background suggested danger or conflict. She walked home the same route every evening. She lived alone in a one-bedroom rental above a music shop. She kept a small garden on her windowsill. None of these details brought the investigator closer to understanding why life ended the way it did. The original crime scene photos emerge from the envelope like fatting ghosts. A dim back alley beside the old freight station. Snow had been falling that night, light, intermittent, the kind that dissolves on skin before it can sting. The alley was narrow, flanked by brick walls that absorbed sound and gave no secrets away. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no footprints that could be traced, only smears of disturbed frost that detectives struggled to interpret. The cause of death was blunt force trauma, delivered with such precision that it seemed less like rage and more like intent. But intent without motive is a hollow thing, almost academic in its cruelty. The investigator lowers himself into the creaking chair, gloved hand steadying the file. He remembers the early days, long hours spent canvassing neighborhoods, interviews that spiraled into dead ends, evidence that felt meaningful but never formed a pattern. Acquaintances expressed shock, grief, and confusion. No enemies, no scandals, no debts, nothing missing from her apartment except the sense that someone had been there long enough to disturb the air, though they left no trace that could be proven. The case stalled, then slowed, then quietly faded into the long corridor of unresolved archives, where silence settles easily and questions stop echoing. Yet tonight the atmosphere shifts. The investigator feels something subtle like a thread tugging from the past, urging him to pick up the pieces. The room feels colder than it should, or maybe that is simply memory sharpening itself after decades of dullness. He studies portrait again. Her eyes are calm, almost solemn. The camera captured her in the kind of moment where a person is neither smiling nor sad, suspended in ordinary thought. But now, under the lamp's quiet glow, her expression carries a different weight, a silent plea for clarity or closure. The investigator adjusts the lamp, its hinge squeaking softly. Shadows move across the table, stretching over the brittle corners of the documents. He exhales slowly. There is something here, something he missed, something that kept the case from resolving itself all those years ago. The silence thickens until it becomes almost tangible. Then he reaches for the first sheet in the stack, and the story begins to reassemble itself, fragment by fragment, as if awakening from a long, patient sleep. 2. Case reopens due to discovery of new crucial evidence. It began with an unexpected message, a brief, almost hesitant note forwarded from a regional archive technician who had been digitizing old evidentiary materials. The investigator read it twice, then once more, eyes narrowing not from skepticism but from the sudden stirring of something long dormant. The technician claimed the existence of a single overlooked item, a photograph misfiled in an unrelated case box from the same era. It bore a timestamp aligning with the night of death. At first, it seemed improbable. Records from the 1970s were notoriously inconsistent, and misplaced documents were not unusual. But the technician insisted the image captured a partial view of the alley, the very location where it had been found. No one had previously documented such a photo. No mention of it appeared in the logs. Its absence from the original case file was an anomaly, subtle enough to be dismissed yet profound enough to reopen the investigation. The investigator drove to the storage site, the winter wind brushing against the windows like a persistent whisper. He didn't speak during the ride, not even to himself. Silence offered a clearer pathway to thinking, and he followed it. The technician, a soft-spoken man who appeared younger than his credentials suggested, led him to a small desk covered in scanning equipment. He offered only minimal explanation. "Found it by accident," he said, voice low. "Didn't want to assume anything, but it didn't look right." The investigator nodded. No need for more words. He understood the tone of someone who had discovered something they wished they hadn't. The photo lay on a clean cloth, preserved in its original matte texture. A glowed faintly in the background, illuminating frost on the ground. The camera angle suggested the photographer had been walking or hiding. Only a portion of the alley was visible, but in that narrow frame one detail stood out. A shadow, elongated and sharply defined, cast along the brick wall. Its proportions hinted at a person, though the angle distorted the silhouette enough to make identification impossible. But there was something else, a small, nearly imperceptible smear of light reflecting off an object near the figure, something metallic, something carried. The investigator studied the photo for several minutes, absorbing each grain, each obscure line. His breathing slowed. This was not merely additional evidence. This was context, a glimpse of someone present at a time they should not have been, someone never mentioned in any testimony, someone whose existence had been erased by a simple filing error. He requested any additional materials from the technician, but none existed. The photo was a single, isolated piece, yet sometimes that was enough. A thread is thin, but it can unravel an entire fabric. He sealed the photograph in a fresh evidence sleeve, labeling it with deliberate precision. Then he left, taking the quiet weight of rediscovery with him. The air outside felt colder than before, though the sky remained clear. It was the kind of cold that seeped into thought. Back in his office, he pinned the photograph above the old case file. It hung slightly crooked, the shadow stretching downward like a silent accusation. This, he knew, would lead somewhere. And when a case reopens after years of stillness, it does not do so gently. It stirs the past, unsettles the dust, and demands that forgotten voices be heard again. This case was no longer a dormant archive. It was breathing, reviving, reshaping itself with each examination. The investigator sat down, hands folded, eyes fixed on the image. There was clarity to be found, and clarity once summoned does not vanish. 3. Investigator examines past reports to identify overlooked details. The old reports rest across the desk in neat rows, arranged by date, then by relevance. The investigator takes his time, not from reluctance, but from a discipline honed by years of sifting through layers of truth disguised as routine observations. The edges of the papers curl slightly, and the ink has softened to a muted gray. Still, the contents remain intact, waiting for someone patient enough to listen without expectation. He begins with the earliest reports, the initial discovery of the body at 6:14 a.m., the call placed by a freight operator who had noticed something unusual while preparing the station yard. The operator's interview transcript reveals little. He saw what he believed was a discarded tarp at first, then realized it was a person. The man's handwriting, neat but shaky, records no unfamiliar sounds, no footsteps, no vehicles. But then, halfway down the page, the investigator notices a line he had forgotten. Thought I saw some light moving near the alley wall, but figured it was just reflection from passing cars. There were no cars reported in the vicinity between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The roads had been closed for freight operations. Reflection from where then? He circles the line, the pen strokes slow, deliberate. In the next report, an officer's early assessment, there is mention of belongings. A handbag with neatly arranged items, a folded grocery list, a single key on a brass ring, a faint scent of lavender. But then another small detail emerges. One corner of the handbag's interior lining was torn. Not ripped by force, but worn, as though someone had reached inside many times searching for something. The officer dismissed it as wear and tear. The investigator now wonders if it was something else, a pattern of habit or anxiety or precaution. He moves to medical documentation. The examination notes reveal a precise injury consistent with a single, focused strike. The tool used was never identified, though one examiner suggested it might have been something with a flat edge, perhaps wood or metal, something portable, something a person could carry with them without raising suspicion. He glances at the newly discovered photograph. The faint metallic glint near the shadowed figure seems to echo the examiner's words. Then there is the statement from supervisor. She left work at 6:02 p.m. He remembers she used to walk along the same path, yet she never deviated from routine. But in a footnote, overlooked in the decades since, the supervisor added, she seemed distracted that week, kept looking over her shoulder as if expecting someone. Why had no one pursued this? Why had no one asked if she feared something specific? The investigator feels a quiet shift in his chest, not anger but a controlled pressure, the sensation of responsibility sharpening. He continues through the documentation. A neighbor reported hearing a faint clink, like metal tapping brick, sometime around midnight. Another witness described seeing a figure at the end of the street, standing still, half-turned, as if waiting for something. The officer at the time wrote, likely unrelated, street poorly lit. Too many dismissed observations, too many assumptions. The investigator pauses and leans back, letting the facts settle into a steady arrangement. Beneath the surface, patterns begin forming, not yet complete, but present, like shapes emerging through early morning fog. Torn handbag. The moving light in the alley. The unseen figure. The metallic glint. The impression she had been anxious in her final days. Every detail carries weight now. The investigator returns to the photo one more time. The shadow in it appears slightly angled, suggesting the person was moving not fast, not slowly, but with measured intent. Someone unhurried, someone familiar with the environment. Someone who did not need to hide, because they already understood how to disappear. He closes the file. The room feels different, the quiet heavier, the past more insistent. He knows the next step. He must every name associated with final weeks. not as they were documented then, but for what was hidden beneath what seemed ordinary. The investigator begins assembling the list of potential suspects the way one might reconstruct an old weather pattern through traces, recollections, and the faint residue of human behavior. He lays out photographs, typed statements, handwritten notes, all arranged in a meticulous grid across a long conference table. The room is still, lit by a single overhead lamp that throws precise shadows across the evidence. It almost resembles a quiet museum display, fragments of lives intersecting at the edges of final moments. The first name belongs to Dean, a former of's. In 1975, he worked 2 desks away from her in the municipal building. His file is sparse, a man who kept to himself, held no complaints, and was recorded as cooperative during the initial investigation. But one detail resurfaces. He once offered a ride home during a late snowstorm. She declined, politely but firmly. In his statement, Dean described her as kind but distant. He insisted he had no involvement, and his alibi, attending a family dinner, was confirmed by multiple relatives. Still, the investigator now wonders if there was something unspoken in Dean's phrasing. People often reveal more through hesitation than through confession. Next is Helen, the landlady who rented the upstairs apartment above the music shop. She lived in the unit below and occasionally heard footsteps packing late at night. In her testimony, she mentioned once hearing speaking in a hushed tone near the window, as if addressing someone outside on the street. Helen assumed it was a friend or perhaps a private conversation she was not meant to overhear. She did not press further. Her alibi at the time was straightforward, asleep, corroborated only by her own word. Not unusual, but not airtight. The third profile is Samuel, a delivery driver who made evening rounds in the district. He admitted to passing on several occasions while she walked home. His first interview transcript shows no defensiveness, merely confusion and mild discomfort about being questioned. He claimed he knew her only by sight, but the investigator pauses at a line in the officer's notes. Appeared unusually nervous when asked about the alley route. The officer had dismissed it as routine anxiety. Another name emerges from older logs, one largely ignored after initial questioning. Ferlin, a maintenance worker assigned to the freight station. He handled repairs in the vicinity of the alley where was found. His interview consisted of brief answers. He expressed shock but provided little detail. No clear contradictions, no visible motive. But the investigator's attention sharpens on a sentence buried deep within the case notes. The maintenance report for that week lists a missing tool, a compact metal striking implement used for alignment tasks. The tool was never recovered. Next, a personal acquaintance, a friend of from the music shop below her apartment, reported that had appeared preoccupied in her final weeks, often glancing through the front windows as though expecting someone to arrive. Assumed it was a personal matter, something delicate. She offered support but dismissed the concern with a faint smile. His alibi was solid. She had been visiting her sister in another town. Still, her account adds emotional texture and suggests was aware of someone quietly orbiting her. A final potential suspect, though indirectly connected, Officer, one of the responding officers in 1975. At the time, he had recently joined the force. His notes were concise, perhaps overly so, and lacked the observational nuance of more experienced officers. His recollection of events placed him near the freight station earlier that night, though not in the alley. His alibi was accepted. But the investigator now studies the handwriting, the clinical simplicity, the absence of detail. Retired many years ago. Not a suspect, perhaps, but a variable that shaped the course of the case. The investigator steps back, allowing the names to settle into a mental constellation. Each person carries a faint trail of possibility. Each file represents a life that intersected with some gently, some momentarily, some in ways still unclear. The light hums overhead, washing the documents in a cold, steady glow. Then he looks to the new photograph once more. One of these individuals or someone connected to them fits the shadowed silhouette. Logic will be the guide. Emotion remains at the door. The truth is rarely dramatic at first glance. It is incremental, found in overlooked words, late-night movements, subtle breaks in routine. He studies each face again, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself. 5. Clues emerge slowly, linking inconsistencies to emotional conflicts. The investigation progresses with the methodical rhythm of a clock, each tick a small revelation, each a hint of something missed before. The investigator revisits every note, every recorded memory, every statement that once felt ordinary. The process is quiet, almost meditative, yet charged with the awareness that any detail might become the fulcrum of truth. He starts with torn handbag lining. Though subtle, it suggests repeated checking, a habit formed out of vigilance rather than carelessness. The investigator imagines walking each evening with her hand brushing against the handbag's interior, ensuring something remained in place. Perhaps a personal token, perhaps a letter, perhaps a note of warning. He searches the old apartment inventory. Nothing was documented beyond routine personal effects, but if she had carried something valuable or private, she might have removed it before entering her home. The investigator draws a slow breath. Whatever she kept tucked in that handbag, it was never recovered. Next, he returns to the delivery driver, Samuel. His route logs reveal a gap, small but noticeable. A 14-minute discrepancy between two delivery points near the alley. In 1975, this was likely dismissed due to manual, but the investigator knows that 14 minutes can reshape an entire timeline. Samuel claimed he passed several times in the preceding weeks, enough to recognize her, not enough to know her. But the investigator sees something subtle. In his handwritten logs, the handwriting stutters on the night of the incident. A slight tremor, a hesitation, not proof of anything but an echo of uncertainty. Then there is Dean. His family confirmed his alibi, but the investigator notices a quiet tension in the transcript. Dean was polite, even helpful, but described with a peculiar phrasing. She was kind, but she didn't let people in. The investigator reads it again. It almost sounds like disappointment, restrained by courtesy. Dean never expressed frustration, but disappointment alone can shape unpredictable undercurrents. He sets Dean's file aside for now. The maintenance worker, Ferlin, remains a compelling thread. A missing striking tool, a job that placed him near the alley, late-night assignments, and a short interview devoid of emotional texture. The investigator studies the maintenance logs again. There is a repair recorded earlier that week on the very illuminating the alley on the night died. Ferlin had been assigned to it. The shadow in the rediscovered photograph could belong to someone familiar with the alley's layout. Someone who knew the position of the light, the blind spots, the quiet intervals between passing patrols. The investigator returns to his impression of being watched, documented through his recollection and the supervisor's comments. Behavior, as seen through these accounts, feels consistent. She perceived someone near her routine path. Not a stranger, someone who blended into the environment, someone whose presence became familiar enough to be dismissed by others but not by her. A neighbor's mention of a metallic clink on brick adds another layer, a striking tool perhaps, or something similar. The inconsistencies tighten like threads slowly weaving into a clearer pattern. The investigator steps back from the board, allowing the emotional undercurrents to settle. He knows better than to feelings. They are volatile, easily misread. But when paired with logic, emotional behavior can point to cause, even if indirectly. He shifts his attention to officer, not as a suspect but as a filter through which the original investigation passed. Concise notes lack descriptive nuance. The investigator rereads a specific line. Area breezy, dim, no other individuals visible. Breezy. The investigator pauses. Snow fell intermittently that night. Breezes could have carried distant sounds, a metallic tap, a soft footstep, a whispered exchange. Might have missed something. Or perhaps the limitations of early training prevented him from recognizing a clue. The pattern grows clearer. Someone watched. Someone familiar with her movements. Someone who could move through the alley without drawing attention. Someone who carried something metallic. Someone whose presence did not raise alarms in 1975. The investigator inhales slowly. The truth is close. But close truths are often the quietest. 6. Unexpected twist reveals the least suspected person as killer. It happens not through dramatic confession or sudden breakthrough, but through the investigator's quiet study of the rediscovered photograph. He enlarges it, studies the angle, measures the proportions of the shadow. He cross-references height data, posture tendencies, known walking habits. The simplicity of the figure is almost deceptive, a blend of detail and distortion. And then it emerges. The shadow's angle indicates someone carrying weight on the dominant right side. Not heavy weight, but enough to tilt posture slightly. The investigator compares the silhouettes of each suspect in old photos. One by one, they eliminate themselves. Dean's stance is symmetrical. Shoulders slope leftward. Ferlin carries tools on the opposite side. Helen moved with a distinct forward lean. Then there is the quiet outlier, officer. His personnel file includes one occupational detail overlooked entirely decades ago, an old shoulder strain from earlier academy training, which caused him to favor his right side. His silhouette matches the shadow's tilt. But that alone is insufficient. The investigator digs deeper, accessing detailed logs. On the night of the incident, claimed to be elsewhere. But a cross-reference of old patrol routes reveals a discrepancy. A patrol shift exchange made late in the evening, not documented with precision. Moved closer to the freight station earlier than originally believed. Next, the missing striking tool. Maintenance logs confirm it vanished during his patrol window. While no single document proves he encountered it, the alignment of timing becomes difficult to dismiss. The investigator re-examines original interview. One sentence stirs. Didn't see or hear anything unusual. But in the early officer's handwritten margin note, almost ignored, arrived faster than expected. He had already been near the alley. Then comes the smallest but most devastating detail, a note from supervisor. That had looked over her shoulder throughout the week, that she appeared uneasy around official buildings. The investigator follows this thread quietly, slowly. Had once submitted a municipal complaint, a routine notice about malfunction and patrol irregularities. Had been one of the officers assigned to follow up. Their paths had crossed.